Hello, my friends. Welcome. My name is Joe. This is the Joe Martino Show. And today we're going to talk about an incident with my son where he ruined an entire freezer full of meat. The surprising reaction I got from some of my friends, and 5 steps that we can engage in that I used in this process to help facilitate change in our lives. Let's kick it off. This is the Joe Martino Show.
You're listening to The Joe Martino Show, a podcast dealing with all things emotional, relational, and human nature. Joe is a licensed counselor in the state of Michigan, specializing in relationship therapy. He is also the author of the book, The Emotionally Secure Couple. All advice offered in this episode is offered for entertainment and educational purposes only. Enjoy the show.
All right. Hello. Welcome to today's show. I hope that today is going well for you wherever you're at. There's a bunch that I want to talk to you about relatively quickly. To be honest with you, we want to get into some things about how we can make change. One of the things that I'm constantly talking to people about is change. I do want to talk to people with young kids right now, just for a minute though. And I want to tell you something that you need to understand. Nothing will matter more than your relationship with your kids. And the problem when I say that is what people hear is, spoil your kids, don't give them consequences, and don't direct your kids, don't train your kids, be your kid's buddy. And I don't want to be my kid's buddy. If longtime listeners know, I did an episode probably about a year ago where I talked about I want to be my kid's friend, not their buddy, because buddies want you to be better. They want you to grow. They want you to live well. That isn't what I mean. What I actually mean is that I want you to build the relationship with your child while you're training them, while you're teaching them. And one of the ways that we do that is we teach our children about life. But I want you to celebrate 2 things with them. I want you 3 things. I want you to celebrate failure with them. In other words, I want you to regularly ask them, hey, what have you failed at recently? What have you tried and it didn't work? What have you wanted to learn about and you struggled? I want you to bring to the front of your mind when they make mistakes, hey, you know what? It's okay. You're learning. And then I want you to teach them gratitude. If you can raise adults that do those 3 things, you're going to be winning, my friend. You are going to be winning. I promise you, you're going to be at a place where you are winning and things are going far better for you than you think because you're raising adults who know how to handle this world. I constantly run into this with people that are like, my kids, they don't know how to be grateful. Well, who raised them? We're talking about their adult kids. My kids don't know how to be thankful. Well, who raised them? My kids don't try anything. Well, who raised them? And I want to tell you a story that illustrates this. We're just coming out of hunting season. For those of you who don't know, which I don't know how you couldn't know, I love hunting. I love filling my freezer with field to fork meat. The first weekend of the season, my son left the freezer open for about 4 days. And this was a problem because earlier this summer he had done it for long enough that we were concerned we might have lost meat. We didn't actually lose any meat besides the pork that was in the freezer at the time. And most of that was because we weren't willing to try it with the pork. But this was a total loss. Everything was lost. And, and he's crying. He's upset. Clearly I'm frustrated. His mom's frustrated, my wife. And we're going through it. And I'm frustrated. He's crying. Like, I can't believe I ruined all that meat. And so now we have decisions to make. And it's never more clear to me that we have decisions to make until I tell people stories like this. Because here's what would happen when I tell people a story. Not everybody, but so many people are like, well, what did you do to him? Well, wait, what do you mean, what did I do to him? I hugged him. And people are like, well, yeah, but you grounded him, right? No, I didn't ground him. Because he didn't do it on purpose. He wasn't being malicious. In fact, I'll tell you what he did because I said it to him the night I found out. I said, let me guess. What you did was you went down, you put the stuff in the freezer that your mom told you to put in the freezer, you slammed the door, and then you ran upstairs because our freezer's in the basement. Well, yeah. Well, so the problem is, and I went through like how that works when it's cold and, it's full and that creates a vacuum and that vacuum pushes the door back out and it doesn't close that way. The latches aren't strong enough to handle that. The idea that I would punish him to help him remember not to do it again is insanity to me. So here's what happened. He failed. And some people are like, oh, well, you could just refill your freezer. No, actually, because of some things going on, we're not at a place where I could just afford to replace that meat. I'm very thankful that it happened right around hunting season because then I can go out and I can fill the meat or I can get the meat and put it in the freezer, if things go right. And thankfully they did. And then we can start to chip away at restocking our meat. And as we're doing that, one of the things that I realized was being punished doesn't motivate people. I don't want that to happen again. He already doesn't want it to happen again. He was crying. And he wasn't crying because he thought he was going to get in trouble, because that's just not something that runs in our family. And I'm amazed at the amount of people that their kids do something that is kid appropriate. It's something that they do. And they think that the solution is either to pretend that nothing bad happened, which we didn't do with Joey. We told him that's bad. In fact, my wife was like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be allowed to use the freezer until we can figure out a solution. We have a little alarm now, so we were able to solve that. But why would I punish him? Instead, what I said, you know what? You're learning. That's the phrase I want you to bring to front of mind. You know what? You're learning. It's okay, you're learning. Or, hey, you know what? This is really bad. You're learning. Because I want my kids to think a certain way, so I talk about it. I'm like, hey, run it out. What's the worst that happens? If dad doesn't get any deer, we just eat less meat this year. That's not the worst thing that could happen. It's bad, but it's not the worst thing that could happen, right? It's something you can learn from. You can grow from this. You can move forward. And that is a phrase that I want you to bring to the front of your head when your kids are doing something and they mess up. Hey, you're learning from it. And maybe have a conversation with them. What are you learning about it? What did you learn from this? How are you growing from this? Don't be afraid to have that conversation. Because if you can have a conversation with them where your voice is consistently the one saying, hey, you're learning, and that's good, you're celebrating failure. You're actually helping them learn from failure. And that's going to pay dividends. This really doesn't have a whole lot to do with what I want to talk about today. It is a side tangent because I'm just always kind of caught off guard by people like, well, what did you do to him? What do you mean, what did I do to him? We talked about what happened. We talked about why it didn't work. And then we made corrections and moved forward. That's what I did to him. And I hugged him. We made a family sandwich in the front yard because he was pretty upset. That's what we did. And I would encourage you to consider that. Now, what I do want to talk about today is how do we come to places like that? In that moment of crisis, how do we make a choice? And there's 5 things that I want you to consider. But before I get into that, you have to consider the difference between form and function. Form is what you do. Function is what you're hoping that form will get you. And you have to ask yourself, what is it getting me? In other words, the things that I'm doing, why do I do them? What do I hope they're going to get me? That's an important question. And this is why I led with a parenting story, because so many parents complain about their behaviors their kids have. And I was asking, well, where did the kid learn that? Where did the kid develop that? And maybe one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, if the things I'm doing as a parent aren't getting me what I think I'm trying to get, maybe I need to make changes. Or sometimes you have to be willing to let it fail enough to work. We've talked about that in the past. Did it actually not work, or were you just not willing enough? Were you just not willing to let it fail enough to work? Those are 2 different things, and that's important to consider that. Right? So that's form and function, and we have to consider that. Now, the 5 steps that we engage into that is step 1 is we have to pause. Right? When I found out that the freezer was ruined, the first thing I did was I went and checked it. My daughter went downstairs to get an ice cream cone out of the freezer, and she came up and she said, I think that all the meat in the freezer is ruined. So I went downstairs and I looked, and sure enough, it was ruined. So I'm going to pause. Now, I'm not just pausing to confirm whatever the bad thing is that has happened. I'm also pausing because I want to pause and observe what's going on around me. So my wife's distraught. My daughter's kind of in discomfort. My son is extremely uncomfortable, right? He's extremely distraught. He's crying. Now, I could let loose with yelling. I just don't know what good that's going to do me. So we're going to pause and we're going to observe. That's step 1 and 2. Observe what's going on. Observe how are people around me feeling. Observe what do I need to do to get what I want in this situation. And what I want in this situation is not for the meat to get better, because that's impossible. What I want is for my son to know that nothing matters more than my relationship with him, including a freezer full of meat. And at the same time, he has to change his behaviors so that we don't lose a freezer full of meat. Now, what I've just done, once I move to that mentally, what I've just done is I have started to evaluate, what do I want and what are my options to get to what I want. And this is really important because people often don't think about that. What is it that actually matters to me in this moment? And what will matter when I'm on my deathbed? I think about that a lot. I'm telling you, if you have young children at home, Don't worry about the messes. Don't worry about all the pressures. Don't worry about all the sports teams. Spend time playing with your kids. Spend time hanging out with them. Sure, get the stuff done that needs to get done, but it all goes so fast. Life goes fast. And so one of the things I'm thinking about, literally in this moment, standing in the kitchen by the basement door, I'm trying to think through, who is the man that I want my son to become? He's 13. I'm not all that concerned about behaviors at 13, except for how they affect who he becomes at 23, 33, 43. Who do I want him to become? And then what choices do I have in front of me? What behaviors do I have in front of me that I can choose that help me get him there? So first we pause, then we observe, then we evaluate. What do we want? What are our choices? It sounds a lot like one pay risk. Then I have to choose. What am I going to do? And a lot of people get stuck here because they don't do anything and they live life kind of passive aggressively or passively, and it kind of falls apart on them. And so what do I want to do to choose? What am I going to choose to both teach my son in this moment that, hey, we've got to come up with different behaviors because a freezer full of dead meat isn't good. A ruined meat isn't good. And you matter more than the meat. And failing, making mistakes is part of life. And you can grow from this. In other words, how do I act appropriately, not overreact? So what I chose to do in that moment was I hugged him. I told him I loved him. I said, buddy, we're going to have to figure something out with the freezer. You're going to have to help clean it once everything finishes defrosting. We're going to refreeze it right now because we can't deal anything with it tonight. Because I think it was Monday night of opening weekend. So I had to go back to work early the next morning. So what we'll do is we will plug it back in, let everything refreeze. And then this weekend, we will unplug it. We will let it thaw. We will empty it. You will help with that. And then we will clean it out and you will help with that. And we'll figure out the meat going forward. And I talked him through my reasoning. Those were the choices that I made. Now, step 5 is you then measure the effectiveness of the form that you chose. Did it get you the function that you wanted? In other words, did my son learn how to do something different? Did he learn that I love him and that, maybe not learn that, but was that reinforced? And did he learn that there's nothing more important to me in that moment than his relationship with me? There just isn't. Relationship wins. That's just not a slogan I put on a t-shirt. I really mean that. Relationship wins. And the problem is we confuse spoiling people with relationship, but really when people spoil their kids, it's not for the benefit of the kids, it's for the benefit of them in an unhealthy way. It's a very codependent mess. Now, here's the 5 steps again. You pause, you observe, you evaluate, you choose, you measure the effectiveness of what you chose. And here's the thing, I'm giving you an illustration with my son, but this is something that you should be doing, I think, with everything. And this can be just a rhythm. Just slow down. Slow down for a hot second. Take that pause. Ask yourself, what do I want to accomplish in this moment? What's going to matter? If this is talked about in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, how do I want it to be talked about? What are my options to do that appropriately? And then choose and then measure. And when you measure, you compare what you got versus what you wanted to get, and you make appropriate adjustments. So I parent my son differently than I parented my oldest daughter because I didn't have a lot of this knowledge at that time. And I was learning, and there were things that were done in my world when I was a kid that I didn't think worked, but I didn't really think through, how am I going to do it differently? One of the dangerous things to me in modern relationships is we have a lot of ways that we're not going to do something, but we don't really think through, then what are we going to do? And that's not good. That's not helpful. And so we want to kind of lean into this. So I tell my clients all the time, you get to choose whether or not you talk and how fast you talk and how loud you talk. And listen, I'm a loud guy. If you know me, I'm loud. I don't mean to be, but I am. I blame it on my Sicilian genetics. But I don't have to be loud in that moment. I can take a moment and I can pause, because here's the thing. Earlier this fall, I broke a pair of $200 glasses. Kills me that they were $200. Now, I've had them for 4 years or 5 years. I don't know how long it is, but there's nothing wrong with them. I just put them someplace where I lost track of them. I stepped on them. They broke. They were not fixable. I didn't do that on purpose. And I don't understand how beating myself up is going to help me not do it next time. But what I did do was I went through how it happened, the events that got me to that, and what I'll do differently the next time I'm using my glasses in that situation. That is these 5 steps broken down into where they're just a habit. If you read my blog, iamjoemartino.com, iamjoemartino.substack.com, or go to joemartino.com, click on Emotionally Inclined. Read the post dated, oh boy, what day will it go up? Read the post dated for December 2nd. I think that's the day. It's my brother's birthday. It talks about change, and it talks about how change doesn't happen all at once. And a lot of times what it comes down to is, how do you engage in something, be willing to fail at it, and then make changes and do it again? And that's what my son needed to learn. Okay, you still got to take the meat down to the freezer. You still got to take the things we bring home from the grocery store down to the freezer. You still got to go down and get things out of the freezer so that we can prepare meals. And you've got to make sure that the door is closed. So literally, the next time he went down, I said to him, don't forget, we close the door, we push it shut, and then we kind of push a little bit of resistance on it to see if it opened. I know, Dad. I know you know, buddy, but I'm just making sure. But you can do this with anything. You can do this with your spouse. You can do this with your kids. You can do this at work. You can employ these 5 steps anywhere in your life. And if you do them on repeat, you will achieve change. Try it. Let me know how it goes. Try it and write in and tell me, hey, this worked, or you're an idiot. I keep telling you I'm going to read this email. I should read it. I've had people write in and tell me I'm an idiot. One person wrote in, she told me I'm an idiot and I'm ugly. And she could not believe that I was both. I guess that's the old, you can be crabby or you can be ugly, but you can't be both. I don't know. You can be ugly and you can be stupid. I don't know. I'll have to ask her. I have emailed her a couple times and she hasn't emailed me back. I haven't emailed her in a while, so don't come writing and tell me you need to stop emailing her. All right, that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this, would you share it with one of your friends? If you found this helpful, if you think you have a friend that might benefit from these 5 steps, text it to them, email it to them, share it on your socials. I cannot tell you how much that helps me. If you haven't already, hit subscribe. Go to iamjoemartino.substack.com. Hit subscribe there. You'll get 1 to 2 posts a week. I'm not going to blow up your inbox. I'm never going to sell your email address. I purposely keep commercials off of this, but I do need to create more followers so that I can go get a publisher for my next book, which is Hiding Behind God, and then the book after that, Raising Emotionally Secure Kids, and then the book after that, Fight Club, Teaching Men to Fight for What Matters. All of those things are in the queue. I'm looking forward to it. We're winding down 2025 here. It is crazy how fast the year goes to me. If you have an idea for something you want me to talk about, feel free to write in and let me know. All right, thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share with a friend. And hey, give us that rating in your podcast store. Until next time, change possible.